Welcome back. You're watching the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton and Earl Boske. We're going to shift our focus a little bit to regional developments in Guyana. Just concluded elections, and for the first time in the 50 or so years that Guyana has gained independence, we've had a change in the party running the country. Now we have David Granger, who was sworn in on the 16th of May as the new president of Guyana. Ever since independence, the People's Progressive Party, the PPP, has ruled the country basically, that form mostly of people of Indian descent. There's a big question now, will Mr. Granger be able to reduce or eliminate the political division or the race division that's been existing in Guyana? Race has always played a major part in politics in Guyana, and this election was no different. The PPP ran the election based largely on what had happened the last time they were out of power. They spoke about the race riots in the 60s, the fact that the prices of basic commodities had skyrocketed, the instability caused in the country. Interestingly, since the PPP has been in power, they've suffered a lot of criticism of cronyism. There's been the subject of the cocaine trade that flourished alongside the gold mining in Guyana. The fact that the president's son, along with several of the other children of ministers and former ministers, were occupying seats in parliament. What are your impressions of the elections coming out of Guyana and some of the questions that have emerged about David Granger's ability to unite the country?
Well, first of all,
you lived in Guyana for a while too, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I lived and worked there for several years.
Yeah.
I worked with the People's Progressive Party as well as the PPP administration. So I have a history in Guyana of being associated with the People's Progressive Party. I was very close to the president, the first lady, who eventually also served as president. And as with everywhere else, I had as many friends in the opposition as well, as I, bearing in mind the race and the ethnic element of the Guyana situation. I had the good or bad fortune, depending on who you speak to, of being regarded as the highest ranking non-Guyanese person of African descent, which you and I will call a black person, serving in and working with what is largely described as an Indian administration.
Right.
Nonetheless, I think I was able to swim with and against the tide as necessary. But having been back home for all of, I would say, about 15 years since then, one is able to and did in fact assess the elections from the standpoint of history. And my own views on the election, folks, are in today's Voice in an article entitled Guyana, I Saw It Coming. It's in my column called Chronicles of a Chronicler, and it is it is in the Voice on page 9, I think it is.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying here is, for example, that first of all,
actually.
Huh?
Page 5.
Yeah, page 5. First of all, what I've seen coming out of the election was that the change that has just taken place in Guyana is reflective of a similar change 23 years ago in 1992. When the PPP Civic came into office in 1992, it was declared by President Carter and others as the first free and fair elections since independence in 1966. And given that democratic opening was there, the PPP won. And it continued to win, I think, 4 or 5 consecutive elections. Fast forward to today, you have the APNU, an alliance for national unity.
A partnership for national unity.
A partnership for national unity. It won the election. But it's not as clear-cut, as black and white as your description of it as a new party. Most Guyanese will tell you the APNU is the former People's National Congress, which changed its name when it decided to open up to some other elements, some other parties, including Rupert Roopnarine, who was the former co-leader of the Working People's Alliance, WPA, with Walter Rodney. The PNC under Granger, a former Army general, was able to make an assessment that the decision by the PPP in 1992 to embrace a civic element as against its historical description as a communist party, by embracing a civic element that brought in the private sector, blacks, and other generally people who would have been described as non-communist and non-PPP, that helped in terms of bringing in more of the middle ground to the PPP, and the civic was helpful in that regard. What we have here is the victory of an alliance, not just a partnership for national unity, which is still regarded as a PNC with a new name, just like the PPP Civic was a PPP with a new name, but the APNU also went into an alliance with Alliance for Change, which is AFC.
AFC, which is a multiracial.
Right, which has led, which had Moses Nagamutu as its presidential candidate. Now, Moses Nagamutu,
a former member of the,
member of the PPP, my closest comrade, was my subject minister. He's a journalist of long standing and is now the new Prime Minister. One of the things that is not widely known is that the current president, Granger, when he retired from his position as General of the Army and Chief of Staff, he went into publishing. And he published a magazine called the Guyana Review, which was very, very popular from the standpoint of its effort to give historical analyses of Guyana that were unique in their own way, helping to bring out, you know, the African stroke black element of Guyana history, which the PNC and its supporters, including Mr. Granger, at the time used to accuse the ruling PPP administration of stifling, you know, the Afro-Guyanese aspect of history. So that today, I think, at the end of the day, nevertheless, the weeping and wailing and mourning and gnashing of teeth on the part of my comrades and friends in the PPP, until and unless they can prove the things that they are saying, you know, like that the election was stolen, etc., the rest of the world and CARICOM is going to accept the status quo. A new government is taking shape, and in my assessment, there's a new opening, a new chance for a new tomorrow. Where they will go will depend on the extent to which the new administration, a black president with an Indian prime minister, that looks good. However, Guyana, like the rest of CARICOM, what they can look forward to over the next year is the usual things that happen after an election. Some senior public servants will be either sent home or they will go home. Cases will be filed, election cases, corruption cases will be filed against former ministers, fingers will be pointed, allegations will be made. That sort of thing. I mean, I've heard the Prime Minister, my good friend, he has said that one of the first things they're going to do is take down all of the election propaganda material, signs and so on from around the city and around the country. That's all well and good. It will look clean, but the wounds, you know, will continue to fester for a year in the hearts of those who lost. And those who won the victory, the element of pointing and saying, listen, it's our turn now. Because, you know, parties and the leaders can think and say certain things, but the people who elected you, the extent to which you could calm their emotions, whether that emotion is emotional refusal to accept loss or emotional victory that is going as far as wanting to shove your fingers in, you know, in the loser's eyes, the extent to which the leaders are able to cap that, and they mustn't lose sight of the fact, however, that Guyana 24 years ago in 1992 and I make that point in my article, it was declared by the United Nations as the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere after Haiti.
I think it's now third.
Pardon?
It's third after Haiti and I think Nicaragua?
No, it was second after Haiti. I was in Guyana at the time.
Yeah, but it's third now.
Well, what I was going to say is that Guyana is one of the few CARICOM countries that continues to post positive growth, you know, annually in terms of positive economic growth. The raw materials, oil is being found off the coast. There's already gold, diamond, how you call it, the one that produces aluminum.
Bauxite?
Yeah, bauxite, you know, so that the forestry, you know, the water, rivers, the possibility of Guyana as the headquarters of the Iwokrama International Biological Diversity United Nations Global, you know, Forest Kingdom, as, you know, Guyana has the possibility, and, you know, folks, we have to remember Guyana is not an island. I keep saying it is 3 times larger than England, and the less than 5% of Guyana is occupied by people, you know, and therefore Guyana has all the possibilities in this age of climate change and global diversity, where the search for renewable energy, Guyana can lead the rest of the region in terms of developing those new economies, because given Guyana's size, despite its size, at the United Nations, it is part of the group of small island developing states, because while it is not an island, its economics places it no better off than the smaller states of the world. So, as back in 1992, the Caribbean and the world is going to be ready to help give Guyana a hand to move on to the next phase, but we have to be realistic. Race, religion, and culture will continue to influence politics, and never mind how much window dressing there is going to be, I'm going to say that the extent to which the President and Prime Minister can influence beyond just their cabinet and their respective parties the need to build up on what has started, because this is the first election, you know, you didn't have violence. I mean, 1-2 places get burned, but in the context of Guyana, that's nothing. You didn't have violence for the election, and there was a peaceful conclusion.
Although I hear in one of the towns, Enterprise, some of the PPP supporters painted 2 donkeys in the opposition cars and beat them to death.
Yes.
But we're due for a break. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation.
That's part of politics.
We'll be right back.